am Monson, 33rd team. Check the Mike podcast with our guy Steve Palazzolo, my second favorite Irishman behind Roy Keane. Sorry, buddy. I mean, me as a United guy.
Roy
Sam,
Keane's
happy New
divisive, you know. You either love him or you hate him, depending on where you are in the old Saipan incident. So I get
That's
it. I
right.
understand that.
Yeah, my Irish roots too, man. Sam, good to talk to you, man. Thanks so much for joining us today, man. Football. This first week of the NFL wild card was just absolutely nuts. We were just talking about the Bucks. I want to ask you your opinion from an outside Tampa Bay perspective. Was it more of the Bucks not really playing to their best, especially defensively, or was you just got to tip your hat to a guy like Jaden Daniels in Washington?
Yeah, I mean, I think a big part of it is Jaden Daniels making plays when he needed to. Honestly, though, it was such a close game. It really comes down to that fumble, jet sweep,
Yeah.
jet play. It sucks. Like though, I felt as a neutral, I felt sad in that game that one of those teams had to lose. You know, they were a team. I would have liked both of those teams to progress to the next round. The Bucks are fun. Baker Mayfield's such an awesome guy to root for as a quarterback. But the Washington Commanders with Dan Quinn and his kind of redemption arc, and then Jaden Daniels playing as well as any rookie maybe ever in the NFL at the quarterback position, and he looks phenomenal. It's like eventually the Bucks had their chances. They made that sort of defensive stop. Got a little bit of help with officiating, and
Mhm.
the Washington Commanders had chances on that little stand, but they got the stand, they got the ball back, they had the lead, and then you put the ball on the turf and Bobby Wagner pounces on it, and suddenly all the momentum and all the advantage that you had suddenly swings back to Washington, and that ended up just being enough, just too much to for them to claw the game back. So I don't think that they really let themselves down or that they underachieved. I think it's just one play in the bounce of a ball, unfortunately, in the playoffs can be the difference.
Yeah, I think too, like that's the reason why you go get Bobby Wagner. Like I know that's not the only reason, but that's the guy with the nose of the football that's been, I mean, it's a future Hall of Famer. And just that's the reason why you have that guy in the middle of the defense to come up with a play like that to give you an opportunity to score a touchdown. I want to get your opinion too on Todd Bowles and Liam Coen because that is the biggest conversation here in the Bay of is Liam Cohen going to leave? We've seen this last year with Dave Canales. Does this mean Todd Bowles' future is kind of tied with that? I'm not asking as far as like inside information, but as far as a guy like Liam Cohen, would you keep him if you were running the risk of losing him, and would you get rid of a guy like Todd Bowles just to keep Liam Cohen because he's such a young, innovative play caller, and who he coached under?
Yeah, this is like a real difficulty of today's NFL is that the second you're successful, your coaches are going to get poached away from you, right? And we saw that a couple of years ago with Philadelphia. They went to a Super Bowl and lost both coordinators in the offseason, and it hammered them last year. I mean, they looked like a badly coached team last year, and Nick Sirianni took the brunt of that. But ultimately, you have to remember, like, both of his coordinators are now coaching somewhere else. They're head coaches with other teams. And then this offseason, they go get Vic Fangio, they go get Kellen Moore. And okay, the offense has been up and down, but the defense has gone back to being the number one unit in the NFL, right? So it's difficult because these guys don't just have to hire well one time. You've got to have a succession plan in place, and you've got to be able to keep this cycle going at coach because these guys are going to get poached away. The only way of avoiding that is, as you said, if the guy that's head coach is also controlling one side of the ball. So if offense is what you're focusing on, if you want to keep the offensive mind, the only way of doing that is to have the offensive mind as the head coach and have a Kyle Shanahan or a Sean McVay. Right. And then it doesn't matter if the offensive coordinator is getting poached because he's not really the architect of the entire system. So that's the sort of decision that the Bucks need to make is Liam Cohen the guy that we want to keep in this building, for the next 10 years as the offensive mind, keep him with Baker Mayfield, keep the whole offense intact. And if so, basically the only way of making that happen is by promoting him to the head coach and relieving Todd Bowles of his job. And it's tough to do that coming off a playoff year where, they had a successful season and there's obviously risks associated with it as well. Like, you're asking him to do a different job. It isn't just
Right.
Head coach is a different gig. And a guy like Shanahan or McVay, not only do they have to run their offense, but they also need to do the 17 other things that a head coach needs to do. So it's a tough call, but it's a difficult situation in today's NFL because the alternative is if you find good guys, they're only going to stay in your building for a couple of years before somebody else gives them a shot.
Sam, it's so funny how the Cowboys, they don't make the playoffs this year, but yet they're still smack dab in the middle of the discussion because Mike McCarthy leaves and now they're looking for a new coach. And of course, Deion was the guy that Jerry has already had a conversation with. Where do you think Mike McCarthy winds up? Do you think he coaches somewhere else next season? And B, who do you think will be the guy there in Dallas?
I mean, I think he'll definitely get another head coaching job somewhere else this season. I don't think he'll be forced to kind of sit out, go away, come back, wait for an opportunity. I think he's been too good. And yeah, maybe he does have a ceiling. Maybe he's not great, but he's very good. I mean, three consecutive 12-win seasons. He has, I think, the third most playoff wins of any active head coach in the NFL right now. Okay, they haven't come recently, but this is somebody that's won playoff games. This is somebody that's won a championship. The resume is too good. When teams are searching around trying to find just anything other than terrible, there's too much positivity to what he can bring to the table. I think someone will hire him. And even Jerry Jones, I think, was kind of looking for reasons to keep him around and gave him a lot of time and a lot of patience. So yeah, I think he gets a job somewhere. Maybe he's the answer to a team like the Jets, who have that kind of weird ownership issue, and maybe there's a lot of the sort of hot candidates, guys like Ben Johnson, would stay away from that because they don't want any part of that ownership situation. Maybe he's the solution to a team like the Jets. And for Dallas, Jerry Jones loved the headlines. Like, if there's one thing that guy is truly elite at, it is generating buzz, marketing. Like, he's turned the Cowboys into the most valuable sports franchise in the world because of marketing. I mean, that's his true genius. And one element of marketing is ensuring that you are always in the headlines. So most of us would look at, former all-time great at your franchise, Troy Aikman, basically saying that the job is a poison chalice now. I think most of us would look at that as a bad thing. I think Jerry Jones probably thinks that's good. This is great. This is headlines. Mm-hmm. All anyone's talking about this morning is Troy Aikman and the Dallas Cowboys. This is exactly what we want from a marketing standpoint. So if Jerry Jones can swing it and make Deion Sanders accept that job, I think he would absolutely love that. Whether it works or not, I think that's his dream, because that's the richest content anybody can come up with is Deion taking the Cowboys job.
Yeah, it's so funny. If there's ever been a better example of any publicity is good publicity, just put up a picture of Jerry Jones and the Dallas Cowboys. I want to ask you about the AFC, the big matchup this weekend. We have people here in Tampa talking about Baltimore and Buffalo. Just looking at this, and it's going to be cold. There's just going to be a bunch of football. A bunch of running the football. Like, does whoever wins that game represent the AFC in the Super Bowl, and who do you think comes out on top?
I think the three teams, and everyone's kind of writing off Houston because we saw them stumble so much, but they played well for half the game last week, and their defense is nasty. I still think Kansas City wins that fairly comfortably, but I think there's three really good teams that are gonna, one spot in the AFC, 3-2 in the championship game. Any of those three teams, I think, could win a Super Bowl this year. I know Kansas City hasn't necessarily been as good as their record this season, but they were getting it together by the end of the year. And obviously we kind of, week 18, like, almost puts a pin in that because they rested everybody, put out the backups, and got waxed by the Broncos by 30. But the couple of weeks before that, they had started to look like playoff Kansas City. And this team has done it too many times where once we've hit the postseason, they've gotten into gear and they've said, okay, it's for real now, let's go. Mahomes, Andy Reid, Travis Kelce, a good offensive line. You can't write this team off. It's a good defense as well. So, yeah, Baltimore and Buffalo is going to be a slugfest. The other thing is, like, what will the toll of that game be, right? Mm-hmm. Somebody's going to emerge victorious in that game. How damaging was it, when they had to come out of the other side? How many players did they lose to beat the other team? That's going to be a big factor. But I think any of those three teams can win the AFC Championship and win the Super Bowl.
Who you got, Buffalo or Baltimore? Who are you leaning towards?
Man, it's tough, right? It's very recency bias, but I can't get past what we saw from Baltimore. Like,
I'm with you, man. I'm
can't stop them. I mean, they run this read option look, and the thing about read option is it's all about assignment football, right? Generally, it's just as long as you've got somebody assigned to each part of the option, you're good. That's not the case anymore with Baltimore, because even if you have a guy assigned to him, that guy has got to try and tackle Lamar Jackson in the open field, and most people can't do that. Or the guy in the middle has got to try and stop Derrick Henry, who's made a career out of running against 8-man fronts. So they're too good. They beat the one guy that you have assigned to it, and then even if you like overload to stop them both in the run game, then you've just exposed everything on the back end, and Lamar Jackson's too good a passer. It almost requires one of those weird Lamar Jackson games, which does happen every now and again, where he's just off, right? The first quarter happens and he's missed a couple of throws, and suddenly he's just not quite the same guy as a passer for the rest of that game. Buffalo, I think, almost needs a game like that where Lamar just doesn't quite play the same way for them to win.
Yeah, it's funny you say that because I feel like in every game, there's 3 or 4 plays where it's just kind of like a standard basic running play up the middle. And when Baltimore does it, it's like, oh yeah, you got to tackle Derrick Henry. Like there's no play off. And then I thought on the one touchdown that he had when Patrick McQueen just kind of running next to him, that was kind of like what defense have been dealing with all year long with Baltimore. Like, I'm not going to get stiff armed by this guy, am I? I can't really go low. Like you just kind of run with them. Like it's not a business decision. It's just like, what do you do? It's kind of, you put your hands up like, damn, they are just that good. I want to ask you about the NFC side of the ball. Who in the NFC do you really like? And I know it's, after 1 week and obviously Detroit didn't play, but who's that one team you like that you think that can really, give their best foot forward of like, hey, this is the team to keep an eye out for on this side?
I mean, look, I think we've been on a collision course for an NFC Championship game between Detroit and Philadelphia for most of the season. I think it's right that we get that. The Vikings made it a question for a while, but the last 2 weeks they just completely collapsed, and I think now those are the two teams. Philadelphia look fantastic right now. Detroit's offense is amazing. The question mark for them is like, are they just too beat up on defense to be able to still be that team that they look like? I sort of feel I'd like to see them do it because I feel sad that like 22 players on IR, 16 defenders, like it's just a bad way of sort of falling out of contention. Like nothing you did, all of your players got hurt. But they've overcome that. I mean, they beat Minnesota with nobody left on defense. They've been able to get by that. So I'd love to see that matchup. I hope we see it. The Rams look fantastic against the Vikings. I think Washington is dangerous. But that's the NFC Championship game that I want to see, and then let the best team emerge from it.
Yeah, it's a great point. You brought up, and I think that was something that wasn't nearly mentioned enough last year when you're talking about Philadelphia and losing Steichen, and wondering what's wrong with this offense, and then losing Gannon, like, what's the deal with this defense, right? You're just like, it happens, right? So you get this close, and how good Philly was 2 years ago, and then we saw it last year here in Tampa where they just lost, and you're wondering, is Sirianni the right guy? Are they ever going to get back there? They did, as you alluded to, bring in 2 different coordinators this year. But if you're Detroit, you're looking at this as, hey, let's not take this for granted. I know we're not the crappy team that they were, and they've done a great job of building, especially on the offensive line. But, Ben Johnson leaves. You don't know if they take a step back next year, and then Jared Goff's a year older, and you just wonder, right, if this is, you got to make the most of these opportunities because they don't come around very often. Before I let you go, I want to ask you about the Raiders. We saw Tom Brady 3 times here in Tampa this year. It's kind of interesting with his involvement in the entire league, right? As a broadcaster, now with the ownership, what kind of impact do you think he's going to have now that we know, all right, Antonio Pierce is gone, GM gone. How much do you think Tom Brady is going to have to do here to make this team a successful team in a division where you got Harbaugh, you got Reed, you got Knicks and Sean Payton? Like it's a steep hill to climb for the Raiders in the AFC West.
I do wonder how long the NFL can just sort of brush it all under the carpet and pretend this is all cool, that Tom Brady can be an owner and a broadcaster and, a guy that sort of has a relationship with players and coaches and stuff. I mean, they are Tom Brady and Fox have the Lions game this week, and the Lions have 2 head coaching candidates, Ben Johnson and Aaron Glenn, there, right? Like there's a whole list of stuff he's not technically allowed to do as an owner and a broadcaster. He can't, talk to these guys within their own building. He can't watch practice, can't do any of the normal things that color commentators do as part of their job. You're also not allowed to like tap up opposing coaches. So, I don't know if he can even talk to these people as normally they've been sort of sequestering people and bringing them to a studio or whatever, and Tom Brady sits down on a neutral site so they're not violating anything. I don't think he's allowed to talk to Ben Johnson or Aaron Glenn based off being an owner of the Raiders and a guy who is trying to, convince people that the Raiders are the place to be and to come and coach for the team and come and be a general manager and all these kinds of things. It is a wild conflict of interest that the NFL seems to be just hoping nobody really pays attention to, or it can go away. I don't know how long that can go, but I mean, look, Brady is arguably the greatest player to ever play the game. He has a gravitas that few people can match, and he can convince people of things, right? I think he's already convinced Mark Davis that the thing to do is, sure, it's a bad thing. One and done GM looks a little bit Mickey Mouse, but let's get a clean slate. Let's start over. We'll find two new guys. We'll pair them together, and that's the best way. That's the best foot forward. His next job is convincing whatever coach he wants, Ben Johnson maybe. The Raiders we're going in a different direction now. It's a new team. I'm a big part of this. It's not going to be the mess it's been for the last, 10, 15, however many years you want to go. So I think he can have an impact. The only question is whether that impact becomes a problem for the NFL and starts to violate a whole bunch of, conflicts that he's not allowed to have.
Yeah, Tommy the tampering made it's just so many opportunities to tamper as an owner. It's like, it's just Tom. That's fine. Like, all right, we'll see. Because if somebody really had a bug up their ass and they wanted to say something about it, they could. But they also understand what that does. That opens the door. Because as much as we hate to admit it, these owners are all in it together. Right? They're living a different world. They're living a different life than the rest of us with the amount of money that they have. And we've seen it, whether it's Jerry or Dan Snyder over the years. These relationships between these owners are very, very unique. So it would just have to take one guy to be like, hey, this isn't cool. And that would just open up, and that would just be a whole ball of wax. Sam, before I let you go, let everybody know what you got going on, man, with the 33rd team. You and Steve, you do a great job on the Check the Mic podcast. I love seeing what you guys are doing.
Yeah, thanks. We took our show this year, left PFF in the summer, created Check the Mic, and we're now at the 33rd team. You can find us on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcasts if you just search Check the Mic.
The man, Sam Monson, NFL on Twitter/X. Sam, thank you. You always make me feel a whole hell of a lot smarter when it comes to football. I appreciate you, brother. Thank you for your time, and have a great rest of your week, buddy.
Anytime. Thanks for having me on.